I caught my parents on security camera, planning to give my brother my apartment. So I set a trap and exposed everything at dinner. Hey Reddit! I caught my parents plotting to move my deadbeat brother into my apartment, so I set the perfect trap and destroyed them all at family dinner. Grab your snacks because this one's wild. Justin here, 31 male, and I was halfway through debugging some nightmare legacy code when I checked my apartment security feed and saw something that made my blood run cold. My parents were letting themselves in. Normal Wednesday afternoon, right? Except my dad was holding a tape measure. I'd given them a spare key for emergencies months ago. Stupid move on my part. But watching through my phone as dad started measuring my walls, not just looking around, but actively measuring doorways and writing stuff down. I knew this wasn't any emergency I'd signed up for. Mom was taking notes on her phone, doing that thing where she tilts her head and squints like she's redecorating in her mind. Then, my younger brother Brandon walks in behind them like he already owns the place, this smug grin plastered across his face. "This is perfect," Brandon said, dropping onto my leather couch and putting his dirty shoes on my coffee table. "Way better than that dump I've been crashing at. And Justin's never even here anyway, always at the office." My mom nodded along, still taking notes like she was planning a surprise party instead of a hostile takeover. "We'll need to move the desk out of the second bedroom," Mom said. "That can be Brandon's room. Justin can work from the office like everyone else." "I'm sorry, what?" Dad measured the doorways, the hallway, the whole 9 yards. "Once Brandon's stuff is moved in, Justin won't make a scene. He'll understand family comes first. We just need to do it while he's in San Francisco for that conference next month." I sat there at my desk watching these people plot to steal my apartment in real time, and I started laughing. That dead, cold laugh that makes your coworkers think you've lost it. My business partner Nathan glanced up from his monitor with this "should I be concerned" expression. Maybe he should be, because I'd just watched my family plan a hostile takeover of my apartment. And instead of feeling shocked or hurt, I felt something else entirely. Relief, because now I had them all on camera. And I was about to make them regret every single choice that led to this moment. See, I'm a software architect. I own 30% of a startup that just got Series B funding. I make good money, real good money. And 6 months ago, after my mom borrowed my grandfather's vintage Rolex from my apartment without asking, the only thing I had from Dad's father who actually gave a damn about me, I installed a full security system. Cameras, motion sensors, the works. Found that Rolex 3 weeks later on Brandon's wrist in an Instagram photo. He told his friends he'd bought it with his business earnings. Brandon's business earnings consisted of whatever MLM scheme he was currently failing at, while Mom and Dad funded his lifestyle. Multi-level marketing garbage that never went anywhere except deeper into their pockets. I'd been documenting everything since then. Every conversation, every time they chose Brandon over me, every dismissive comment about how I should help family more while Brandon bled them dry. They just handed me enough evidence to bury them all. I texted Brandon, "Hey man, want to grab dinner this weekend? Been too long." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. They were probably conferring, wondering if I somehow knew. "Yeah, dude, sounds good." "Cool. Mom and Dad free too?" "Sure, bring everyone, I'll cook at my place Saturday." I had 4 days to prepare, 4 days to set the trap. And Brandon, that smug jerk, was about to walk right into it thinking he'd already won. I grew up in Seattle, as the older son of Richard and Patricia Wallace. Dad ran a successful import business bringing electronics and home goods from overseas. Mom managed rental properties they owned, 6 units scattered across the greater Seattle area. We had money, a nice house in Bellevue with a view of Lake Washington, country club memberships, the whole suburban dream package. Except I didn't have parents who saw me. I had investors who stopped investing the moment Brandon was born. I was 8 when my brother arrived, and I went from firstborn to forgotten overnight. Suddenly I was the responsible one, the one who didn't need help because I was so capable for my age. Funny how an 8-year-old becomes self-sufficient when nobody's watching anymore. The shift was immediate and brutal. Before Brandon, I got bedtime stories and help with homework. After Brandon, I got, "You're old enough to handle this yourself." Mom stopped coming to my school events because Brandon needed constant attention. Dad stopped teaching me things because Brandon required all his patience. I remember being 9 years old, trying to show Dad a science project I'd worked on for weeks, a model volcano that actually erupted. He glanced at it for maybe 5 seconds before Brandon started crying in the other room. "That's nice, buddy. Go clean up before dinner." He never looked at it again. Brandon got everything. Private basketball camp every summer while I was told sports were just a hobby, and I should focus on academics. new clothes from Nordstrom while I got hand-me-downs from cousins' birthday parties with his whole class, while mine were unnecessary expenses. When Brandon turned 16, they bought him a brand new Audi A4 Midnight Blue, leather interior, all the features. They threw a party and invited everyone to celebrate their baby boy getting his license. When I turned 16, Mom drove me to a used car lot and told me if I wanted wheels, I'd better start saving from my Best Buy paycheck. I worked electronics retail for 2 years, 40 hours a week on top of school, to buy a 12-year-old Ford pickup with 140,000 miles on it. The transmission slipped, the AC didn't work, and the radio only got AM stations. But it was mine. The college situation was even worse. I got into MIT, freaking MIT, with a partial scholarship. We're talking about one of the best engineering schools in the world. My guidance counselor called it the opportunity of a lifetime. My parents' response? State school would be more practical. MIT is so far away, and the tuition difference is significant even with the scholarship. They wanted me to go to University of Washington and live at home to save money. Meanwhile, they'd already started talking about paying for Brandon's college wherever he wants to go. I went to MIT anyway, took out loans, worked 3 part-time jobs, and graduated with honors while buried in debt that took me 6 years to pay off. Every cent I earned went toward tuition, rent, and ramen noodles. Brandon barely graduated high school with a 2.1 GPA after my parents paid for private tutors to keep him from failing out completely. They threw him a huge graduation party, rented a venue, hired a caterer, invited 100 people. Then they bought him a 2-bedroom condo near UW campus, so he'd have a good environment to focus on his studies. He dropped out after 1 semester. Something about the classes being too corporate and not supporting his entrepreneurial spirit. The condo became his party palace, while my parents kept paying the mortgage and utilities I ground through MIT, through 3 years at Amazon's cloud services division, through 2 more years at a different startup that got acquired. Then I founded my own company with Nathan, a platform that helps mid-sized companies optimize their supply chain logistics. 3 years ago, we got Series B funding. My 30% stake was suddenly worth actual money. First thing I did? Bought this apartment. Corner unit, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Elliott Bay, parking spot in the garage, the whole flex. It was my proof that I didn't need their approval or their money. Everything I had, I'd built myself, but I'd still given them that spare key, because some pathetic part of me still wanted them to be proud, still wanted them to see what I'd accomplished, and finally acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, I'd turned out okay. That key was about to cost them everything. The day after watching them measure my furniture, Brandon texted me, "Hey bro, I need to ask you something important." I smiled at my phone. "Sure. Why don't you all come over Saturday? I'll make that Korean barbecue you guys like." I spent the next 4 days preparing, but not food, I was organizing evidence. Financial records showing every loan I'd given Brandon that he never repaid, totaling just over $28,000 over 6 years. Screenshots of the 7 different business ventures my parents had funded for him that all failed spectacularly. Bank statements proving I'd paid for family dinners, vacations, and gifts while Brandon contributed nothing and took everything. But the real work had been happening for months. See, Brandon's current girlfriend Jessica had reached out to me 12 weeks ago through LinkedIn professional message, very polite. She'd noticed we had the same last name and took a shot, hoping we might be related. Her first message was carefully worded, "Hi Justin, I noticed we share a last name and you're based in Seattle. I'm dating someone named Brandon Wallace and wondered if you might be related. Would love to connect if so." I almost ignored it. Then I looked at her profile. Pediatric ICU nurse at Seattle Children's Hospital. Volunteer work with medical charities. Degree from the University of Michigan. This wasn't someone random. This was someone accomplished being used by my brother. I responded, "We set up a coffee meeting." And that's when everything started making sense. Turns out Brandon had been using her credit cards to fund his latest business venture, some crypto trading course MLM nonsense called Digital Wealth Academy. He'd convinced her to give him access to 3 different credit cards by explaining that his business accounts were tied up in investments, and he needed short-term liquidity to capture market opportunities. Translation: he was broke and wanted to use her money to look rich. He'd maxed out all 3 cards. Total damage, $42,000. She had the statements, and they painted a fascinating picture. Thousands at nightclubs in Bellevue designer clothes from Nordstrom. That new Apple Watch he'd been showing off. A weekend trip to Vegas that he'd told her was a business conference. "I work 60-hour weeks saving kids' lives," Jessica told me, stirring her coffee with shaking hands. I pick up every overtime shift I can get, and he's been buying bottle service and Louis Vuitton belts with my credit cards. But the credit card fraud was just the surface level. She'd also discovered he was selling this Digital Wealth Academy course to people, charging them $3,000 for access to his proprietary trading strategy. Except there was no strategy, just basic technical analysis information you could get free on YouTube, repackaged with fancy graphics and promises of guaranteed returns. He'd sold the course to at least 30 people that Jessica knew about. That's $90,000 he'd collected, with promises of ongoing mentorship and support that never materialized. People keep reaching out asking when the next training session is, Jessica said. He blocks them or makes excuses. One guy told me he emptied his savings to buy the course because Brandon promised he'd triple his money in 6 months. The genius part. Brandon had been listing my apartment as his business address for the LLC he'd created. He'd registered Digital Wealth Academy LLC with the Secretary of State, used my address without asking, and was now conducting securities fraud from my mailbox. Jessica and I spent weeks building a case. She documented every charge on her cards with descriptions of what Brandon claimed the purchases were for versus what they actually were. She collected testimonials from people who'd bought his course and gotten nothing. She even recorded some phone conversations where Brandon promised returns he couldn't possibly deliver. "I just want him to face consequences," she told me during one of our meetings. "Not even for my sake anymore. For everyone else, he's going to scam if someone doesn't stop him." She'd also discovered something else. Brandon had pulled this exact same scam on his previous girlfriend 2 years ago. Different girl, different credit cards, same lies. That girlfriend had just written off the $15,000 as a lesson learned and moved on. Jessica tracked her down and got her story too. "He has a pattern," Jessica explained. "He finds successful women, love bombs them, gains their trust, gets access to their money, and then drains them while making them feel guilty for questioning him." The evidence folders we compiled were damning bank statements, credit card bills, screenshots of his course material, testimonials from victims, recorded phone conversations, business registration documents using my address. Everything needed to prove he'd been running an organized fraud operation. But we had to be careful. Brandon couldn't know Jessica was working with me, so she played along, acted like nothing was wrong, even while documenting everything she's a better actor than I gave her credit for. "He told me you were a trust fund kid," Jessica mentioned during one meeting. "Said you never worked a real day in your life, and everything was handed to you. I believed him until I looked you up and saw you built an actual company." Ah? Of course he'd said that. Easier to be the victim of a successful brother than admit you're a 30-year-old failure living off your girlfriend's credit cards. "He also told me your parents paid for MIT," she continued, "and that you're selfish with money because you won't help him get his business off the ground." I showed her my loan payment history. 6 years of payments, finally cleared 9 months ago. She actually teared up looking at it. "I'm such an idiot," she said. "No," I replied. "You're someone who trusted the wrong person. There's a difference." By the time the family dinner rolled around, Jessica and I had enough evidence to bury Brandon 6 feet under credit card fraud, securities fraud, wire fraud, all of it documented, time-stamped, and ready to hand over to prosecutors. All we needed was the right moment to deploy it, and I was about to create that moment. Saturday arrived. Perfect weather. I grilled bulgogi, made banchan, set the table nice. My apartment looked clean, professional, successful, everything they were trying to take. The folders sat in my home office, waiting. The trap was set, and Brandon was about to learn that the brother he'd dismissed his entire life was a lot smarter than he looked. They showed up at 6. Mom brought dessert. Dad immediately started eyeing the walls he'd measured 3 days ago. Brandon walked in with this grin, already acting like he lived here. And behind him came Jessica. She caught my eye, gave me the slightest nod. Game on. "Place looks great," Dad said, doing a slow turn in my living room like he was appraising property. "Really great space. You keep it so clean." "Thanks," I said, plating the meat. "I try." Brandon was already making himself comfortable, sprawling on my couch like he owned it. "This TV is sick, bro. Is this the new OLED? Must have cost a fortune." "Worth it," I replied, "for the place I actually own." Small jab. He didn't catch it. Dinner started normal enough. We ate, made small talk about nothing important. Dad mentioned his business was doing well. Some new contracts importing LED fixtures from manufacturers in Taiwan. Mom complained about one of her tenants being late on rent again. Brandon rambled about his crypto consulting business that was supposedly about to take off. "I've got this system," Brandon said, gesturing with his fork. "It's all about reading market indicators that other traders miss. The signals are there if you know how to look." Jessica pushed food around her plate, jaw clenched. I could see her getting angrier with every word out of his mouth. "How's that going?" I asked, voice neutral. "Really well, actually. I've got about 30 students now in my mentorship program, teaching them everything I know about digital assets and wealth building." "Interesting," I said. "And these students are seeing results?" "Absolutely. I mean, it's a journey, right? Not everyone has the discipline to follow the system, but the ones who do, they're crushing it." Crushing it. Right. Mom jumped in with praise about how entrepreneurial Brandon was, how he'd found his calling. Dad nodded along, proud of his boy who was finally making something of himself. I wanted to vomit. Then Mom cleared her throat. "Here we go. So, Justin, we wanted to talk to you about something as a family." I put down my fork. "I'm listening." "Brandon's lease is ending next month," she continued, using that gentle voice people use when they're about to ask for something unreasonable. "And his landlord is raising the rent to something ridiculous. $300 more per month, can you believe it?" Actually, yes. Rent had been going up across Seattle for years. This wasn't news. "We were thinking," Dad jumped in, "since you have that extra bedroom and you're barely here anyway, always at the office or traveling for business, maybe Brandon could stay here for a while, just until he gets his business really established." The audacity was breathtaking. They'd literally been in my apartment 3 days ago, measuring walls and planning this takeover, and now they were presenting it as a reasonable request. "You want Brandon to move in?" I said flatly. "Just temporarily," Mom added quickly. "A few months, maybe 6 at most. Just until the business revenue stabilizes your family. This is what family does." "Temporarily," I repeated. "Like when he temporarily borrowed my PlayStation in high school and I never saw it again? That kind of temporary?" Brandon's face flushed red. "Dude, that was like 15 years ago. I was a kid. You're really going to bring up stupid stuff from high school?" "You sold it," I said calmly, keeping my voice level. "To buy weed. Mom and Dad never made you pay me back. Just told me to let it go because you were going through a phase." The room got quiet. The only sound was the kitchen clock ticking. "I also temporarily lent you $5,000 3 years ago for your social media marketing agency. Remember that?" Brandon shifted in his seat. "That business had bad timing. Market conditions. You spent it on a used BMW that broke down after 2 months." I looked at my parents. "Never paid me back, said you would, but never did." "We're not here to rehash ancient history," Mom said, her voice getting that edge it gets when she's uncomfortable. "We're asking you to help your brother in his time of need." "His time of need," I nodded slowly. "Right. Let me ask you something, Brandon. Where's your girlfriend staying while all this is happening? She moving in too?" He glanced at Jessica, then back at me. "We haven't really discussed." "That's because you were planning to move in without her," I interrupted. "Probably told her you were staying with a friend while you looked for a place. Meanwhile, you'd be living here rent-free, using my apartment as your business address, bringing girls over when I was traveling. Am I close?" His face went from red to purple. Dad tried to regain control. "Justin, you're being unreasonable. We're talking about family helping family. Your brother needs support right now, and you're in a position to provide it without any real sacrifice on your part." "Without any sacrifice," I repeated. Interesting way to put it. I stood up and walked to my home office. Every eye followed me. I could feel the tension cranking up, everyone wondering what I was doing. Came back and dropped the folder on the table, with enough force to make the plates jump. The sound echoed in the suddenly silent apartment. "What's this?" Dad asked, though I could see worry starting to creep into his expression. "Open it," I said, sitting back down. He did. The first page was a printout of my security camera footage from Wednesday afternoon high-definition color image, timestamp clearly visible. Him with the tape measure extended across my living room. Mom taking notes on her phone. Brandon sprawled on my couch talking about how perfect the apartment would be. The caption I'd added read, "Wednesday, 2:47 p.m., planning unauthorized takeover of tenant's residence." Dad's face went white. Mom's hand flew to her mouth. "Keep going," I said, voice steady. He flipped to the next page. Financial records showing every loan Brandon had never repaid. The $5,000 for the marketing agency, $3,000 for his consulting business, $4,000 for the down payment on that BMW, $28,000 total over 6 years, not including the smaller amounts I'd stopped tracking. "That's private financial information," Mom said weakly. "So is my apartment," I shot back. "But that didn't stop you from breaking in to plan how to give it to Brandon without asking." "We didn't break in," Dad protested. "We have a key, for emergencies. Measuring walls to move in Brandon without my knowledge isn't an emergency. It's premeditated theft of my living space." Brandon tried to laugh it off, that same fake casual tone he used when backed into a corner. Theft? That's dramatic, bro. Mom and Dad were just looking at the place, no harm done. No harm done, I echoed. Right. Is that what you tell all your students when they ask for refunds on your course that doesn't work? His smile vanished. Jessica spoke up for the first time. Her voice was quiet but steady. Tell them about the credit cards, Brandon. Babe, not now, he said through gritted teeth. No, definitely now, she insisted, turning to face my parents. Did you know your son has been using my credit cards to fund his business? $42,000 I work 60-hour weeks saving children's lives while he's been buying bottle service at clubs and designer clothes with my money. My parents looked at Brandon like they'd never seen him before. He opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. That's an investment in the business. I told you, babe, the returns are coming. Once the next course launch, there are no returns. I cut him off. There's never been any returns. Just you taking money from everyone dumb enough to trust you. I pulled out another set of papers. These are the business licenses for your 7 failed ventures over the last decade. All registered to my address without my permission, by the way. Which means when the FTC comes looking for whoever's running these pyramid schemes, they're going to come straight to my doorstep. The room was dead silent now, everyone processing. And this, I laid down another document, is the complaint I filed with the Federal Trade Commission yesterday about your Digital Wealth Academy course securities fraud, unregistered investment advice, wire fraud, mail fraud. Take your pick. Dad found his voice. You wouldn't report your own brother. Watch me. The words hung in the air like a threat, because that's exactly what they were. Mom tried the guilt angle. After everything we've done for you. Like what? I interrupted. Specifically, what have you done for me? Because I have records. I paid my own way through MIT. I bought my own car. This apartment? Mine? My business? Built from scratch. The only thing you ever gave me was neglect, and I'm returning the favor. Brandon stood up, knocking his chair back. You're being a real jerk right now. Sit down, I said quietly. Something in my voice made him pause. Made them all pause. You thought you'd move into my apartment while I was in San Francisco, I continued. Just change the locks, pack up my office, and present it as a done deal when I got back. That was the plan, right? Silence. Well, here's my plan. I'm changing my locks tomorrow. The spare key you have? It's already deactivated. I updated my building security to require my approval for any guests. None of you are on that list. I looked at Brandon. And those business licenses using my address? I'm filing complaints with the FTC, the State Attorney General, and the Better Business Bureau. Every scheme you've been running is about to collapse. You can't do that, he said weakly. Already did. Last night. Federal complaints take about 3 business days to process. So by Tuesday, you'll be getting some interesting phone calls. Jessica stood up. I'm filing a police report for the credit card fraud. Justin helped me pull together all the documentation. My lawyer says it's an open and shut case. Brandon's face went from purple to gray. Babe, we can work this out. No, we can't, she said. I'm done being your ATM, and I'm done watching you manipulate your family while acting like you're the victim. She grabbed her bag and walked out. The sound of my front door closing echoed through the apartment. My parents sat there in shock, processing, realizing their golden child wasn't so golden after all. Justin, please, Mom started. No, I said. You made a choice. You chose him over me for 31 years. You enabled him, funded him, and protected him from every consequence. Well, not anymore. I'm done being the backup plan you ignore until you need something. Dad tried one last time. We're still your parents. No, I replied. You're people I used to know who happened to raise me. There's a difference. I walked to my door and opened it. Dinner's over. Get out. They left. Brandon tried to say something on his way out, but I just stared at him until he dropped his eyes and shuffled past. The door closed behind them. I stood there in my trashed kitchen, surrounded by half-eaten Korean barbecue, and felt nothing but relief. My phone buzzed. Text from Jessica. Thank you for helping me see who he really was and for having the guts to do what I couldn't. I texted back, thank you for the evidence. Good luck with everything. Another buzz. This one from my Uncle Robert, Dad's brother who'd always been the family black sheep for refusing to enable Brandon's nonsense. Heard you finally grew a spine, proud of you, kid. Let's grab coffee sometime. I smiled at that one. The fallout was immediate and spectacular. By Monday, Brandon had already contacted me 14 times. Texts, calls, voicemails, all variations of the same theme. How could I do this to him? I'd ruined his life. Mom and Dad were furious. Jessica had actually filed the police report, and he might face charges. I blocked his number. Tuesday morning, I got a call from the building manager. My parents had shown up at the front desk trying to access my apartment. Security had turned them away per my instructions. They'd made a scene, threatened to call their lawyers. Let them, I told the manager. If they come back, call the police. Wednesday, the federal complaints started processing. Brandon's LLC got hit with inquiries from the FTC about his crypto trading course. Turns out selling unregistered investment advice is super illegal. Who knew? Well, I knew. That's why I reported it. The state attorney general's office sent him a cease and desist about his business practices. He had 14 days to comply or face further action. His MLM upline dropped him immediately. Can't have federal investigations associated with your pyramid scheme? Bad for business. Uncle Robert took me for coffee on Thursday. He'd heard everything through the family grapevine and was having the time of his life watching it unfold. Your dad called me, Robert said, stirring sugar into his coffee. Wanted me to talk some sense into you. And I told him you made perfect sense, that he'd been enabling Brandon for 3 decades, and someone finally called him on it. He grinned. He hung up on me. Sorry for dragging you into this. Don't be. I've been waiting for someone to stand up to them for years. I tried when you were younger, but he shrugged. They shut me out. Called me bitter and jealous. Were you? Of what? The privilege of funding their golden child's failure parade? Robert laughed. No thanks. I built my own life just like you did. That's why we're having coffee while they're probably having a crisis meeting about how to fix Brandon's latest mess. He was right. According to my mom's sister, who secretly supported my decision and was feeding me information, my parents had spent the last 3 days trying to control the damage. They'd hired Brandon a lawyer for the credit card fraud case. Expensive lawyer, too, probably draining their savings. The lawyer had looked at the evidence Jessica provided and basically told them Brandon was screwed. The FTC investigation was just beginning, but it was federal, which meant it would grind slowly and thoroughly through every shady thing Brandon had done. His crypto course, his MLM schemes, his unregistered investment advice, all of it was under review. And Mom and Dad were starting to realize that protecting him this time might actually sink them too. My aunt also mentioned that Brandon had moved back into their house. His condo lease was up and no one else would take him in. So now, at age 28, he was sleeping in his childhood bedroom while federal investigators looked into his business practices. How are they handling it? I asked her over the phone. Not well, she said. Your mom keeps calling everyone in the family trying to get someone to convince you to drop the complaints. No one's biting. Most people are actually relieved someone finally held him accountable. What about Dad? He's angry, mostly at you, which is ridiculous. He's also starting to realize how much money they've wasted on Brandon over the years. I heard him tell your mom they might need to sell one of the rental properties to cover legal fees. Good. Let them face some actual consequences for once. 3 weeks after the dinner, Jessica called me. I wanted to give you an update, she said. Brandon took a plea deal. Already? His lawyer advised him to. The credit card fraud was solid. I had every receipt, every statement, everything documented. He pled guilty to identity theft and credit card fraud, got 2 years probation, has to pay full restitution, and if he screws up even once, he goes to jail. How's he taking it? About as well as you'd expect, blaming everyone but himself. But here's the interesting part. The federal investigation found something bigger. I sat up straighter. Like what? Turns out his crypto course wasn't just unregistered investment advice. He'd been taking money from people promising guaranteed returns, then using new investor money to pay old investors. Classic Ponzi scheme. Oh, that's perfect. The U.S. Attorney's Office is filing charges. Mail fraud, wire fraud, the works. If convicted, he's looking at 18 months federal prison minimum. I should have felt something. Guilt, maybe, or concern for my brother. Instead, I just felt satisfied. Justice, finally, for everyone he'd scammed. How are my parents handling it? According to the family gossip, not well. They're trying to get him a better lawyer, but can't afford it. Already sunk 50 grand into the credit card case. And now they're facing another 100 grand minimum for federal defense attorneys. Jessica paused. Your Uncle Robert told me they asked him for money. He laughed in their faces. Of course he did. Robert had watched them enable Brandon for years, while shutting out anyone who questioned it. Now they wanted his help. One more thing, Jessica added. Brandon's girlfriend after me? She contacted me. Turns out he pulled the same scam on her. Different credit cards, same lies. We're comparing notes. How many people did he scam? At least 6 that I know of. We're building a victims coalition, making sure the prosecutor has everything they need. After we hung up, I sat in my apartment, my clean, peaceful, Brandon-free apartment, and realized something important. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel responsible for fixing my family's problems. Their disaster wasn't mine to manage anymore. 2 months after the dinner, my dad showed up at my office. Building security called up. "There's a Richard Wallace in the lobby, says he's your father. Tell him I'm busy. He says it's urgent, about your brother." I sighed. "Send him up, but stay close to the elevator." Dad looked like he'd aged 10 years in 2 months. The federal case was grinding him down. I could see it in his face, his posture, the way he moved. "Justin," he said when I met him in the lobby, "we need to talk." "No, we don't. Brandon's going to federal prison. The U.S. attorney won't budge on the charges. He needs a better lawyer, someone who can negotiate. Not my problem." Dad's face hardened. "He's your brother. And you're my father. Didn't stop you from planning to steal my apartment." "We weren't stealing. You were measuring my walls," I cut him off. "Planning to move him in while I was out of town? That's theft. Breaking and entering. Doesn't matter if you had a key." He tried the family obligation angle. How could I let my own brother go to prison? Didn't I care about family? I laughed. Actually laughed in his face. "You want to talk about family? Let's talk about how you bought Brandon a car at 16 while I worked retail. How you paid for his failed ventures while telling me to be more self-sufficient. How you celebrated his mediocrity while ignoring my actual achievements. We were trying to help him. You were enabling him. There's a difference. And now he's facing federal charges because you never let him face consequences for anything." Dad's voice got quiet. "Dangerous. If you don't help him, your mother and I are done with you." "We've been done since I was 8 years old," I replied. "You just never noticed because I stopped asking for anything." He stared at me for a long moment, then turned and walked away. I watched him leave, expecting to feel something guilt, maybe, regret. Instead, I just felt tired. Tired of being the responsible one. Tired of being ignored until they needed something. Tired of watching them throw money at Brandon's problems while acting like I was selfish for wanting basic acknowledgement. Nathan appeared at my elbow. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said. "I really am." 6 months later, Brandon took a plea deal for the federal charges, guilty to wire fraud and mail fraud, in exchange for 18 months federal prison and 5 years supervised release with full restitution to victims. My parents spent everything they had on lawyers trying to get him a better deal. Sold one of their rental properties. Took out loans. Burned through their savings. None of it mattered. The evidence was overwhelming, and the prosecution wasn't interested in sympathy. Uncle Robert called me the day Brandon reported to federal prison. "Thought you should know. Your mom tried calling me again. Wanted money for an appeal. What did you tell her? That I hoped she learned something from all this." She hung up on me. My aunt, the one who'd been feeding me information, stopped by my apartment the next week. "Your mom asked me to talk to you," she said, "about helping with Brandon's restitution payments. Apparently the court ordered him to pay back about $200,000 to his victims, and they can't cover it." "Good," she smiled. "That's what I told her you'd say." She called me ungrateful. The family tradition continues. "Here's the thing, though," my aunt said, getting serious. "She's not doing well. Your dad either. The legal fees, the stress, the embarrassment, it's breaking them. Part of me feels bad. Part of me doesn't," I replied. "They made their choices. Every step of the way, they chose to enable him instead of helping him. Now they're living with the consequences." "Fair enough." She stood to leave. "For what it's worth, I'm proud of you. It took guts to do what you did." After she left, I sat on my couch, in my apartment, in my life that I built, and thought about what she'd said. My parents were suffering. Brandon was in federal prison. The family was fractured, probably beyond repair, and I felt nothing but relief. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel and help us bring you more and better stories. Thanks.